Hi, everybody. It's Marjorie Waldo with Culture Under Fire. Today, we're talking about the art of policy, and I'll be talking to Representative Anna Eskimani about how artists build culture, allies protect it, and she's one of the policymakers who has worked hard to make culture non-negotiable. We want to explore what real arts support from government agencies looks like in practice, not just applause, but policy, and figure out how funding for the arts expands opportunities, strengthens economies, and ensures culture remains a public good. So Representative Eskimani, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm really glad to see your face and know that you're here with us. So it means a lot to us to talk to policymakers because things today with arts and culture are fragile when it comes particularly to government funding. And the podcast is intended in general to show all the reasons why arts are important. And this angle that you're here to talk about with me is really meaningful. So I appreciate you. So
Absolutely.
tell me a little bit about yourself. I want you to, I warned you, I want you to talk about what you did in high school.
Yes. I mean, my origin story is grounded in the arts. And so again, I thank you for your leadership and uplifting these issues and really speaking to the value that arts and culture adds to our civil society and to our economies. And so I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you.
To answer your question, I grew up in Orlando, Florida. I'm the daughter of working class immigrants who came to this country from Iran. And I actually think that that's a part of my story too, in the sense that Iranians are known for their poetry, known for their love of the arts. I grew up a big Beatles fan. My mom was a huge
Oh,
Beatles fan in Iran, and she brought that love to her children. My dad was more of a Pink Floyd kind of a guy, so I
okay,
just
that's
grew up in a
great.
house that really cared about music, that cared about culture, and celebrated culture. I mean, I grew up being a part of the Persian New Year called Nowruz and teaching that to my classmates. I remember cultural days at school where we would showcase, parts of our identities to our peers and to see what we have in common. And so, with that said, despite the endless amounts of love my family had, we did not have a lot of money. And so, finances were always our biggest stress, our biggest struggle. And I have to tell you, my opportunities to get exposure to more structured arts and culture were limited. It was either what I had at my public school with my music teacher or my arts teacher, or it was an essay competition that I would participate in, and I would get free tickets to go to the Bob Carr, which was back then
Right.
was our performing arts center. And that was my first exposure to seeing a live orchestra. Was I got a prize in writing an essay and got tickets for my family to have a day at the orchestra because we just didn't see it as being financially accessible to us. In 2004, everything in my life changed when my mom was diagnosed with cancer earlier and then passed away that year. And that is a huge loss that I carry with me to this day. I was just 13 years old when she passed away.
It's so
I was in
young to lose your mom.
eighth grade with my mom. Yeah. And I was in eighth grade going into high school. So you have all these factors, right? You have this major loss of losing your mom as a young girl at
Absolutely.
13. And then also this transitional period of going from a middle school to a high school and not having that support person there for when your body is changing, when your hormones are shifting, and all these dynamics. And I'm really lucky to have a twin sister because,
Oh, that's
we
so
did
cool. I
everything
didn't
together.
know. That's very
I,
cool.
I have a twin sister, so we're super close. And my story is her story. We've gone through all this together.
Right.
So fast forward, I'm in high school now. I'm a freshman in high school. And one of my friends, who actually we're still friends to this day, and he is a teacher in Orange County Public Schools. But he was my first openly LGBTQ plus friend. And so we had a crush on the same boy,
Oh,
which
how funny. That's
was a great
great.
way to get connected. And so he was in a musical at my high school in the ensemble. And he asked us to see him, to just go support him in this musical. I had never been to a musical before. And so I went really to support my friend. It wasn't for any other reason. My twin sister and I bought tickets and we went, and my life changed forever. I mean, just watching this musical, and it was actually Carousel, which obviously is a very, kind of outdated musical and the concept
Yes.
of its storyline,
Yes.
though it has been modernized and brought back to Broadway. But seeing Carousel in that format of my peers performing it, telling this beautiful and tragic love story, um, got me hooked. I was like, I want to be a part of that. Like, I
That's
want to be a
really
part of that
cool.
storytelling. I want to be a part of that creativity. So my sister and I started volunteering in the tech program, and we were techies all through high
That's
school.
really
And
cool.
we did, major high school productions, and I just fell in love with the theater. And of course, I didn't pursue theater full time in my higher ed pursuits, but I did always carry with me a love and support for arts and culture as being transformational in supporting especially young people and building our confidence, our character, and our compassion for others, and really just creating leadership skills that are
Well,
translatable to other fields.
you raise a
And then of
lot
course,
of, oh, I'm sorry. You raise a
oh, you're
lot of
good.
points that Arts Garage attempts to focus on. So, first of all, when you talk about whether your family had access to the arts or not, that's a
Right.
big thing for us. We have multiple programs, the Family Series, which brings um, underserved children from elementary schools to see professional productions, traveling productions in our space. We have a volunteer program that provides access to seniors with limited incomes. We believe really strongly that it's our responsibility with our platform to provide access to everyone. I also loved that you talked about how your parents were connected to music during this time and during your growing up years, I mean, and that you carried that with you into your future. I think that's cool that your mom was into the Beatles and that your dad liked Pink Floyd and that you grew up with that music in your life. I think that's really cool. The third thing I want to say that you mentioned that I think is super, super important is the connection you build with other people when you participate in arts performances, or if you're working behind the scenes, or if you're on the stage, or if you're in the audience. It doesn't really matter. It's really transformational. You're still friends with the person who turned you on to musical theater, for example. I think that's very meaningful.
100%. And it first of all, thank you for y'all's work in making sure that kids like me have access to the arts, because there's just so much talent in our community, but in some cases, they'll never know their talent, and we'll never know their talent. There isn't that type of exposure. I was just at the Florida Youth Symphony Orchestra, one of their season openers on Sunday,
Oh,
and
wow.
just watching these brilliant young students, perform these sophisticated shows. I mean, it's just breathtaking. And I know that they're 13, 14, and by the time they're 20, they're just going to be so talented. They're going to be the best of the best. And it's those types of programs that can really help every child reach their fullest potential, but those skills are so translatable. And that was the case for me, being able to build something from nothing, which is very much technical theater. Like, you basically,
Absolutely.
paint this vision, and of course in a high school budget, got to figure out ways to do it while not breaking the bank. And
That's
so
right.
you have this sense of fiscal responsibility and also creativity that allows you to really build something beautiful. And then you have to be able to let go. Letting go is so hard in every part of our lives, but letting go is a natural part of theater, to then have a show close and
That's
say,
right.
all right, break down the set.
That's
We got to
right.
do something else. Right. And that, even that as a practice was very challenging.
Yeah.
But it helps you just build some really important leadership skills that will positively impact your life, regardless if you go into arts and culture full time. Now, I will say for
Forever.
me, I ended up going to UCF, University of Central Florida. I am an avid learner, an avid student. I actually just got my PhD last year
Well,
in
you
public
did two
administration.
bachelor's
Um,
degrees. You did two bachelor's, two master's degrees, and now you have your
yes,
PhD. So that's pretty impressive. And
thank you.
you were motivated to do that, and I think it's amazing. And it's a what you studied was not arts and culture, but I think that when arts and culture captures some kids who feel like they haven't found their tribe, it can pull them towards other loves that they discover. Yours has obviously been um, anthropology, sociology. I don't mean those are your degrees. I mean, that's what I think politics is, right? It's understanding the people in your community, right?
Totally, totally.
And I think that if we can capture more students, it's meaningful. And one of the things I really want to talk about today is the struggle in Florida, but in the nation, with government funding of arts programming. Because
Right.
what we also see is that our schools, especially the schools who are filled with students from families who may not have discretionary income to sign their kids up for summer camps or after school programs. A lot of what the kids are receiving in terms of arts and culture is in the school site, right? So Arts Garage works hard to provide supplementary experiences for these kids to expand their worlds and, explode their brains and let them see other ways of seeing the world, seeing other cultures represented on the stage, and add to what the schools can offer. And I think when you fight for schools and when you fight for arts and culture, it really builds a beautiful community that people want to stay in or people want to move to. So you struck me as somebody I wanted to talk to for the podcast because in 2019, you worked across the aisle to increase arts and culture funding by 800%. That wasn't a typo, right?
Correct. Yeah, we got it back to full funding that year, which
So
was historic.
what
And
moved you to do
unfortunately,
that?
too uncommon in this political climate, to your point.
Yeah. Why did you, what made you want to fight for that?
So much of it is grounded in the personal story I just shared, right? Just knowing the value of arts and culture. I will also speak to its economic impact. So District 42, where I serve today, encompasses parts of the city of Orlando, Winter Park, Belle Isle, Edgewood, Maitland, and the historic town of Eatonville.
Okay.
These are very diverse municipalities. They're diverse in their demographics, they're diverse in their politics. But one common thread that connects all of them is arts, culture, and history. I'll give you an example. I was just at the Pine Castle Historical Society's,
Okay.
annual kickoff of Pioneers Day, where they released their magazine cover for the event, which is always a local artist that puts something together, and they're
Very cool.
celebrating America the 250, in this announcement. And then I'm over in Eatonville, where you have the first established African American town in Florida, and of course, one of the first in the country. And
Zora Neale Hurston,
we're
right?
embarking on a renaissance of Eatonville and reestablishing Eatonville's preeminence in the historical context of the community to drive visitors to the region for economic development. And then, of course, I think about Orlando, where we have one of the most incredible, prestigious, and even just advanced theaters in the world, with the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center, where we have Steinmetz Hall, a structure that is intentionally built with just some of the most transformational acoustics, where you can drop a pin
Yes.
on stage and hear it throughout the theater.
Yes.
We just opened up a new jazz club there too. And then, of course, Lock Haven Park, which is some of our more historic arts venues, from Orlando Shakes to Orlando Family Stage to the Orlando Museum of Art to the Manila Museum. And then, of course, Winter Park. You've never been to Winter Park before. Winter
Absolutely.
Park is all about arts and culture. And it also fuses it with nature. I mean, so the connective tissue between everything in my district really is arts and culture, but they're all economic drivers, because every public dollar we put into arts and culture, we get at least $9 back. And so the small businesses want us to champion this issue. The arts consumers want us to prioritize these issues. The talent, the cast, the crew, the artists want us to prioritize this sector. And so when I was on the campaign trail, my very first campaign back in 2018, this was the number one issue for me, and it was number one issue at the doors when I knocked and canvassed and heard directly from voters. It was the first ever town hall that I hosted when I got elected. I hosted a town hall centered on arts and culture funding. We featured multiple speakers on the topic, and what stood out to me was the nonpartisan support for this issue. Many of our attendees were Republicans, were folks of all political backgrounds because they see the value of arts and culture. And I have to tell you, it is frustrating because that was only 7 years ago. And at this point, though I know on the ground, these issues are still very nonpartisan. Doesn't feel that way on the grass tops, right? It doesn't feel that way in our among politicians, among key decision makers. And it's not even just the fact that we're seeing defunding take place, we're also seeing a lot of censorship. And I think that's also really concerning because you're putting nonprofits in a very difficult situation where it's impossible to vet every performer. It's impossible to vet every piece of art that's in your
Well,
show.
if I can add,
Also, you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, art is also an expression, and you might not agree with every expression, but it is important to create the freedom to tell your story and to conjure up debate and dialogue versus to intentionally avoid it. And so we are in this really just kind of fragile moment, I would say, as it pertains to not just funding for arts and culture, but also the censorship of arts and culture.
I think these are both very good points, and we're seeing it right now in the revisions that they're making to the state of Florida Department of Cultural Affairs grant application, which
You
actually
got it.
was submitted by us in July with a very short window, and then we found out just before the scoring panels were to start that there was going to be a rewrite of the application, that we would have an opportunity to amend our application to fit the new format. I think there are 2 points I want to make. One is that Morgan Furnari from the Americans for the Arts Arts Action Fund was one of my first guests on the podcast. She talked about how nationally the arts and culture world is more making a bigger impact economically than utilities. Like it's a bigger piece of the pie than water, sewage, electricity, all of that. So economically, it's super important to all of to our country, to our states, and to our towns, right? Every municipality is benefiting from the economic driver that arts and culture is. The other thing that I think you said that's super important is that the arts are not political. They're not, which is part of my frustration, is that I don't want to be political, but I feel like I have to be political because I have to make sure that everybody understands what we lose if we lose support for the arts. So you can have in our club, it's in our venue, it is styled after like a jazz club in New York. So it's cabaret style seating. So a table of 6 or a table of 8, and you buy maybe 2 seats and you meet 6 other people at your table that you didn't know before. And they are maybe very different from you in every way, culturally, ethnically, socioeconomically, politically. And it's very valuable to see that we can stand beside each other, regardless of differences in political opinion, and learn and grow from the same arts experiences. That's a big thing. And I am concerned, as are many of our sister organizations, about what will happen as we move forward. Because with this application, I submitted a question or a comment to the site that was open for public comment, asking, are we really going to have to choose to either say that all of our arts programming is appropriate for all ages of people? Like you said, how do you it's even beyond censorship. It's operationally impossible to know what
Right.
your musicians performers, actors, comedians are going to say. I cannot get a script. I can get a script of a
Right.
play that we're going to produce and see what that's about, but I can't control what an actor might say in a talk back. I certainly can't get a script from a comedian. And our
Right.
musicians are
Right.
on the stage as humans. So
Right.
their story includes being able to live their craft, right? And so it's a real
Absolutely.
tricky place to sit.
Well, and just to add to that, the irony of these new proposed rules are originally from legislation that didn't pass. So this is what also frustrates me about the politicization of every agency, and we're seeing this at the state level and the federal level. It's the job of the legislature to pass laws, right? And then we pass a law, and then it triggers rulemaking from an agency. You have agencies that are just triggering their own rulemaking, and they've received no requirement from the legislature because this rule right now that we're discussing, what the original language came from a bill filed last legislative session that did not pass. So
Right.
even the legislature said, you know what, we don't want to do this. We see this as viewpoint discrimination. We see this as going too far. We're not going to pursue this type of policy change.
Right.
And despite us, a super majority Republican legislature saying we're not interested in this, now you have the executive branch doing it anyways. So that's concerning to me when you have just the overreach of the executive branch who are now essentially crafting laws. Well, that's not their jurisdiction. That's not what the founders of this country established. And we're seeing it happen at the federal level and the state level. And so, um, if folks have not engaged on this issue, you really need to, because it's going to create a landscape. Not only is it going to restrict arts groups from even receiving money, but if you receive public money and out of your control, something happens where the rule is broken, it's not even that you have to pay the money back. They're expecting you to pay 3 times as much back. I mean, they're it's excessive. It is so excessive. And I really do see it as just a clever way to restrict funding. It's a clever way to direct funding towards only organizations that reflect the message of the state, and to ignore that freedom of expression and make it much more difficult for new voices to be heard, for new ideas to be shared, and for new stories to be told.
I have to wonder, like when you were discussing the district that you serve and you were talking about all that Orlando brings to the table in terms of arts and culture, one of the things that I have to wonder is if there's a disconnect for some politicians who may not be aware. So for example, our venue, let's say you're a politician who represents my district and you are more conservative and you are concerned about overspending or making sure that we can financially and fiscally be strong and responsible with taxpayer dollars, which I am in and of that sentence not at all opposed to, right? But
Right.
I believe there is a disconnect of some kind. It's the only thing that makes sense to me, where what I see in my town doesn't follow me to Tallahassee when I make my vote. Because do I want my town to change that much? Do I want the venues who do receive support from government sources to be restricted, or for some of the very small organizations, it could be whether or not it could answer whether or not they can keep their doors open. So they really rely on those funds. If you think of museums, historical societies, those are very, very small budgets in my town. And so every dollar really keeps them alive. And I wish we could figure out a way to remind politicians of what we lose when we push forward certain pieces of legislation. And I'm concerned about that because I don't know the best way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, well said. I do think that reaching out to your elected officials proactively, inviting them to a show, helping them tour facilities, I think all of that carries a lot of value so that when they go to Tallahassee, they have that lens of
Yes.
this is the organizations in my district, here's the contributions they make to the local economy, here's who serves on the board of directors. Oftentimes there's also some through lines here, right? Where a board of director member might go to the same place of worship as that lawmaker, or maybe went to the same school, or is a donor of that lawmaker. So I think part of it too is it's something that we refer to as power mapping, where you basically kind of look at the landscape of, okay, who are my elected officials, and do we have any connections to them already? And if we don't, how do we build more connections to them? So I think that's a key part of this too
Okay.
for a nonprofit is to map out those relationships and to really try to build a connection with those decision makers, and then also follow up with them. So even when they go to Tallahassee, obviously there's Arts Day at the Capitol, but folks should be coming up more than just once a session. Come up during committee weeks. Come up to connect with lawmakers, meet with lawmakers back in their districts. When they're not in session, but really try to counter the misinformation, because that's part of the challenge, right? Is that there's a lot of misinformation out there,
Absolutely.
and it's so important for there to be a counter narrative to what the misinformation being perpetuated by some political officials and leaders. And we saw this with Orlando Fringe. Orlando Fringe is part of the National Fringe Festivals. It's one of the most successful fringes in the world. And we were receiving state support for Fringe. And the governor vetoed, this was not this session, the session before, the Governor DeSantis vetoed the entire arts and culture budget.
Very aware. Historic decision. And
I
on
mean,
the
it happened
complete
on April
surprise.
Fools. I thought it was an April Fool's joke at
That's how it
first. I was
felt.
like, am I reading this right? Like,
Right.
why would someone do that? And it also, he eventually said he was blaming Orlando Fringe for it, which I don't find to be accurate. I think he was just looking for some sort of counter narrative to defend his position on that. But what I will say is it woke up a lot of my colleagues across the aisle who were upset by that veto, because again, arts and culture is not partisan. The organizations that benefit from this program are statewide, from South Florida to Naples and Lee County to places like Hillsborough and Orange and Brevard, all the way through the Panhandle up to Leon, right? And
Absolutely.
Duval. So I think we are strength in numbers, and I do
Yeah.
think continue to build those partnerships across the aisle with your patrons, with your board members, with your talent and staff alongside electeds is going to be key to our long-term success.
I
But
agree.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a really hard time,
Yes.
and we do need the private sector to help. Like, we need the philanthropic community to step up, because for a lot of the programs that we have, we just cannot be reliant on public
You
support
cannot.
from government agencies the way that we used to. We really have to see an increase in the private sector and private support.
And if you look at the other area that concerns me, because the grant for us, it's a relatively, no dollar is turned away at a not-for-profit, okay? Even when you talk about the efforts to engage lawmakers, we don't have I'll speak for myself, the staff to add a bunch of tasks like that. That is not easy stuff. I can tell you from curating this podcast, which is new, that making these connections, making them real and have integrity, and make the effort to meet people where they are, to balance that story or that narrative, right? That's difficult. Right. And I look at the state grant dollars, but also the tourist development tax that has often been on the floor for discussion in the past decade. But in addition to that, we're looking at it now much more severely. And if the state of Florida redirects or changes how tourist development taxes are spent so that they are not used for tourism marketing, what happens in Florida? Because Florida is a tourism-driven state. And that concerns me too. That has a much deeper, those are larger dollars and has a much deeper effect on many organizations, ourselves included at Arts Garage. So I hope that this session we can see, and I'll be in Tallahassee in January with a board member and the director of our marketing team, and I hope we'll be up there more often, which is what you're suggesting, and I agree. Put a name to a face, right? Put the work that we do, connect it in a human way would be very beneficial. I hope we can see people look at the politicians, look at the bigger picture in their policy decisions, because my upbringing, the people would say you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Right. Right. I mean, I think that the TDT debate hit a new level last session when there was a proposal from the Florida House to completely essentially move the entire revenue source into property taxes. And that did not pass in a bipartisan way. There was bipartisan opposition to it because it was just such an extreme shift from what we're used to. I will say that in Orange County, this is a very localized debate for us too, because Orange County develops upwards of $350 million in TET revenue every year. And we are having conversations about how can we spend that money in addition to promotion, because we just have so much of it. How can we also spend it on things like housing for workers and transit options for visitors? So we're having discussions locally around how can we also use this funding for infrastructure needs that benefit tourism. But with that said, we have to make sure that everyone can participate and that we're not ignoring the value of destination marketing, and that we're not going to essentially take Florida off the map. Now, again, I do think people come to our state because we have good offerings and good weather and the theme parks and so
The
forth.
beaches, the
But
sports,
the legislature's complete just neglect to understand the value that these programs also add on to arts and culture was very foolish. And I'm glad to see that bill not pass.
yeah.
So yeah, more to come on that front.
I think it's important to tell the story too, which we've been trying to do, that the tourist development taxes are not paid by citizens. They're paid by tourists who stay in hotels throughout the state. So I hope the story becomes more balanced, so that when final decisions are made in Tallahassee, that we don't lose everything. So I know that you are on a tight schedule. So is there anything else that you want to say that I haven't drawn out of you in this time frame?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to share space, and thank you for your leadership in helping to share the value of both Arts Garage and your community, and then arts and culture funding overall. Yeah, I do think this is one of those. One thing I'll add is this is one of those topics that also has, we spoke about the nonpartisan nature of it. I also want to acknowledge the multi-generational support, which is just so incredible, in a time where too many people are just on their phones all day,
Yes.
at a time where things are so digitized and we have AI that is threatening this industry and so many other industries, but also just taking away the personable nature of it, right? Like arts and culture for centuries has maintained its value, and it has appeal to folks of every age and every background. The joy that it brings, the emotion that it stirs, and just the connectivity that it establishes, it's so important for us to preserve and protect it, because it really is just one of those. It's one of those acts that truly brings us together, and it's done that for centuries. And so I just want to thank you again for your work in this field, and just to further emphasize why it is just so important for us to be unapologetic and non-negotiable on these issues, on supporting arts and culture, on supporting the contributions of those who are in the field, and also making sure that people can have a career in this arena. That's one of my other concerns too, right? Is when we pull back funding, makes it harder for an artist to be an artist. We always talk about the starving artist, and it's like, I actually want my artists to be well fed. Like I want
For
them to have
sure.
a bed to sleep
For
on and food in their
sure.
belly so they can focus on their craft and not have to, juggle multiple things all the time to do what they love. I think artists add so much to our lives that they deserve to live a life too. So just thank you for what you're doing. And I look forward to continuing the partnership and seeing you in Tallahassee.
I'm really grateful for your time, Representative Eskimani, and for the conversation. It moves me to hear somebody else who cares and can help us carry the message. So thank you very much for all that you do for Orlando and for Florida, for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. I
So
appreciate you so much.
I hope everybody that's listening will share the show, Culture Under Fire, subscribe and listen twice a month to the episodes that we produce. Give us a review. And if you have a suggestion for a guest or a topic, email us at info@artsgarage.org. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in Tallahassee.